none would marry us. We live in a very racialized world.
We traverse this world, different spaces, just by virtue of the color of our skin.
Unfortunately, that's not a way to live, but I've been forced into this. Don't let those bigots control your lives.
We met I was in my first year at Rhodes. He was a few years ahead of me, and it was a few years of friendship before we started dating in 2010. I think the love just grew from a friendship into something deeper. And yeah, I think it was just that basis of friendship is what has kept us going. I mean, it's been almost 15 years now that we've actually been together. 17 years that we've known each other.
We were in a loud place, but she was like loud. It was fun, and she was like a good person, and I could just seem like it's a really genuine person. So I think that was what kind of drew me.
My first impressions of Theo was also that he was loud and like the center of like the parties. I remember him having a very solid group of friends at the time that even to this day, he's still very close with. And I think that's testament to his character. And I think that's what drew me to him, is his loyalty, his kindness, and his care for people around in every relationship that he has.
I think what I like the least, I don't like perhaps, doors being left open in an entire house. But like that kind of thing happens, right? Like it's natural, and it's important that those things happen. But I'd be quite scared if the person thought exactly like me and just kind of was just a projection of me in a different form. And not having enough sauce on my food sometimes.
That's not what I don't like about him, but I think sometimes he's very adamant that he's right. So sometimes there could be things where we could agree to disagree. Sometimes there's a bit of conceding that needs to be done.
That binary thinking is so detrimental and has had a really kind of detrimental effect on us and our relationship. But we affirm who we are individually, but we also understand together this is something that is always going to be under attack. But at the same time, is that how we navigate the world together is something that we are very much in tune with.
Over the years, I've had to do a lot of kind of unlearning and really tackling biases and maybe racism I had within me in order to understand the world that Theo navigates. And we traverse this world in very different spaces just by virtue of the color of our skin, right? Before we even open our mouth, before we even give you our CV or our background.
My understanding of us and what I want and what I've always wanted is a celebration of both of us as two individuals from differing backgrounds, which aren't really different, but similar. And understanding that there's a place in which we are able to live, love, and just be who we are, our true selves.
I've learned a lot through being with him about like the importance of African community and Ndebele culture being so family orientated and like community focused. You have lots of cousins, but we never know if it's the first cousin, the second cousin, the third cousin, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, great aunt.
Don't really think our cultures are really that different if we really look at it. We're made to feel that though, but then actually the tenets of everything are exactly the same.
My family loved Theo from the beginning. I remember they met him before when we were friends.
For myself, it's very different perhaps where I come from, where it's like you don't bring your girlfriend home after like 2 weeks.
I will say in the very beginning, I didn't quite understand that I couldn't just be introduced, but I had to realize there was a time kind of for everything.
When I introduced Laura, they took to her. I think also my mom wanted you to have at least another daughter, and they were absolutely enamored. I think they were incredibly grateful that I had someone special as she was. My parents would always be happy, and they'd never question because the choices I make would always be trusted. We live in a very racialized world. I think the violence of that racism, whether it's physical or whether it's mental, or whether it's microaggressions constantly, is a big part of our relationship. And that has happened on a consistent basis. You need to set the standard of who you let in around you. And knowing that like this is going to happen whether you like it or not. You have to fight back, and you have to be grounded in who you are and making sure that they see you for who you are in your entire whole blackness and your entire culture and your family. Because it's going to happen to your kids as well.
There were a couple of instances when we lived in Cape Town, for example, where we'd be together in the mall and we'd get kind of shady looks from people. We haven't really been exposed that much in public to a backlash to our relationship. I will say the online space is a very toxic space. So when we posted videos and reels of our kind of lobola negotiations last year and partly traditional wedding, there were some people who be really like derogatory and like quite abusive. But it was always kind of balanced out by a really positive sentiment around like our relationship and complete strangers wishing us well. There was an incident where someone was incredibly xenophobic and racist in my comments because they aligned me with the fact that I was with him. So completely attacking me as a person and not necessarily what I was saying. So there have been instances of that in my DMs, anonymously, and people that I know as well who kind of felt emboldened to attack us. I've had friends and family who have got me on the side, if it's in my DMs or whatever, questioning if I agree with Theo when we post certain things on Instagram, for an example. And there have been times where I've had to defend both his politics as well as mine, to say it's mine, this is what I agree with. But we've had to be very strong about my view on certain things is my view. Yes, him and I have a conversation and we're aligned, but I've decided that I'm my own person. While I can't be responsible for what Theo and what my husband posts,
I have to be protecting my dignity and my basic humanity on a consistent basis. Just my ability to just walk into a place together or walk into a place individually or just show up as myself is attacked, and perhaps not even attacked, it's disparaged.
I've realized that it's easier to talk about something and get it out, and even as uncomfortable it is, than sitting with it for yourself. And part of it is sharing the burden and kind of getting it off your chest, and then part of it is just getting through it together.
What comes out of it is probably going to be better than just keeping quiet. And that is a really big part of how we've been able to navigate very difficult things. I can't sit and see your father get up and do tea. I must go and do it myself. I got to understanding that's not how things are everywhere. It's a good thing to understand that this is clearly how different families and different cultures work. And I think it's such a blessing to see those things because you get to understand it's not just one way of thinking. We understood that this had to obviously be done and it was an important part. But at the same time, my parents are like, you don't really have to do this if you don't really want to, because they don't perhaps have lobola and all these things. But Laura was actually the one who was adamant she wanted to do it. It's a beautiful cultural moment and kind of cemented her in my family, in our culture, and it's been done for, as I said, hundreds of years, and now we've got to do it, which is beautiful. But she wanted to do it.
No, I think for me it was important to recognize that in this union there are two people and we're blending some kind of family. And I knew that when we did the white wedding, it would be obviously representative of kind of the Jewish side. When I said that we were putting it together ourselves, it was more that because there's no manual for how these things work. We don't necessarily have a dowry system for us. So it was purely for Ndebele's side. And we had to lean on a lot of people to ask, what are the kind of things that we do? And we kind of cherry picked the bits that made sense for us and that were possible to be done. It was a great opportunity for like two families to meet. My family wasn't really familiar with the idea or with the practice, the processes.
We really need an award after all this planning. You don't quite understand what you're getting yourself into till you're in it. The first challenge was finding someone who would marry us. I was unaware of this. Some people don't do interfaith weddings. They just won't marry to like a person who is not from the Judaism faith with someone who's not. Or
unless that person converts. That was never a conversation because we were both coming from two different things and we were putting it together.
None would marry us. So we had to go and take a deep dive into the treasure trove of friends and the community of people that Laura has surrounded herself. We had really incredible conversations with people who were also similar interfaith, who said, people just refused to marry them, or they had to find someone, or they had to get married outside the country or something.
Yeah, so they had to find maybe a progressive rabbi or someone who isn't even a registered marriage officer, but just someone who would be prepared to facilitate an interfaith ceremony. And we have luckily found somebody, but it wasn't an easy thing to do. The best advice I've ever received is just to support your partner. Again, you may not understand what they're going through, but just to be 100% supportive of them, and especially within your home. Because whatever happens outside of your home, you can't control. You can't control external factors, but you can control what happens here.
This is going to be difficult in terms of just marriage or just relationships, but it's going to be made even worse by how you navigate this world. People see you and see us as something that they don't want to see in this world, and they will deliberately do things in order to make your lives even more difficult, to make your children's life. One person said, don't ever stop fighting. Don't ever stop fighting for each other. Don't ever stop fighting the ignorance. Don't ever stop fighting the racism and the bigotry. Don't ever do it.